All right, time is 4:01. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. We do have a submitted public comment, and then we have someone here in person for a public comment. The submitted public comment in writing. The question is, how can you guarantee that it will go to the SC roads? The last penny tax was terribly mismanaged. The response to that was provided by the Public Works Director was the funding expenses are reported each month to the Citizen Oversight Committee. All expenses must be items that support each and every approved project following the list set in the 2012 referendum. Richland County follows the detailed requirements set forth by the South Carolina Department of Revenue. The requirements were set in detail as the county's requirement in settling the initial audit. Now all transportation sales and use tax in South Carolina must follow the detailed requirements. Richland County staff take on the responsibility for the tracking of expenses and that undergo an annual audit. Thank you for your question. What is your name, sir?
Right, Longhorn.
All right. Will cameras, will it come up from right there, or does he need to come up close?
He's right there, I believe. His name on the right side?
Yes, you can see him.
All right, here in person for public comment is Mr. McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Please speak loud.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. For your information, I was on the founding committee of TPAC. We were approached with the problem, how are we going to continue public transportation after the money from Scanner ran out. Scanner gave some money to the city because they want to get out of the bus company. You know, there used to be a law that required utility companies to provide public transportation. So we're on this committee initially trying to determine how we're going to continue the bus system. And what we saw, the evidence best practice models around the country was a penny sales tax. So we brought it to council. Didn't pass first time. Lost by 1 vote. And brought it to them the second time, it passed, the referendum didn't pass. Third time the referendum passed. So I heard a comment of the, Mr. Black, you just read, people talk about, I guess everybody talk about corruption when you have a penny sales tax. And but I can tell you, those days are behind us. There weren't corruption. There may be some mismanagement, but there weren't corruption at all. As you all know, the South Carolina Department of Revenues took care of that. They came in and did an audit, and we had to pay a few dollars back. But at the end of the day, they gave us thumbs up. So I know you probably current members may not be aware of that history. Some of you all may be aware of that history, but I think that the comment you had from that you just read, I think there were concerns of the past, but you know, that's behind us. I'm here to talk about the percentage of the penny sales tax that should be dedicated to public transportation. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a 20% of the penny we want to dedicate to somebody. Is that the recommendation?
It hasn't been settled though, so council hasn't
Well,
settled that.
Okay, I'm here, so that's not enough money. You know, it's really interesting. We started this whole process initially to find a solution to deal with the bus system. That was the purpose of it, not highway construction, not parks, not sidewalks, but public transportation. That was the genesis of trying to come up with a solution to continue public transportation. Now, I can tell you, because I bear witness, we went out to various neighborhoods and some of the suburbanites in other areas, they said, well, we ain't gonna support a penny sales tax. It's not gonna benefit us. Well, we're gonna tax ourselves. They didn't say this, but in essence, well, we're gonna tax ourselves just to help poor people. So we went back to the huddle. What do we need to do? And what y'all want? Well, we want some widening roads. We want some sidewalks. We want some open space. And we did all those kind of things in essence. And so, then at the last minute, someone put something in there to help the University of South Carolina, which was good in essence, But it seems like every use for the penny sales tax was focusing on something other than public transportation. I'm here to say public transportation was the genesis of the public sales tax. The genesis of it. And somehow we forgot all about it. Now, I was married to my wife for 52 years. God took her home 2 years ago. My wife used to beat me on my head every time I come in. She said, you work your butt off, then get paid for the penny sales tax, and we don't have any sidewalks in our neighborhood. We don't have any parks in our neighborhood. I said, we did the best we could. And let me say this to you all. I think that, the penny sales tax, the transportation was our focus. Then they got changed around. And when they got it changed around, the African-American community got the short end of the stick. I don't have any sidewalks in my area. But I'm paying the penny sales tax. I think one of the proposals I heard at City Council, they were gonna give so much money to each one of the council members to deal with that district, But so the penny, I lost. And my wife reminded me of that. We lost. African-American communities that, people had their own transportation, we lost. But them suburbanites, some, African-Americans, others, they got roads expanded, sidewalks and everything else. So my recommendation is that we at least have at least 25% dedicated. I know you said that's City Council job to the penny sales tax for transportation. And secondly, just don't leave out the Black community. I'm just being honest with you. I love my wife. And she lost respect for me because I allowed this to be bamboozled and shortchange the African-American community. Mr. Black, thank you for the opportunity to make some observations.
Thank you, sir. I will say one thing that when we had our State of the Penny last year, I think one of the first questions in the Q&A portion at the end that Administrator Brown, he responded about the so-called corruption, mismanagement, whatnot. And I think it's important to point out, to kind of paraphrase what he said, that the Department of Revenues had, what was it when they backtracked?
I did an audit.
When they set the regulations, they retroactively implemented those regulations. And after that retroactive regulation implementation was done, then some of the expenses made by the Transportation Penny Program were found to be not eligible. Is that a quick Cliff Notes version?
It's a Cliff Notes version.
Okay. All right, so I wanted to point that out, but thank you. Because we have such a fun-filled packed agenda, we are asking each of our regular monthly reporters to please condense it down, which I know some will be happy about, so we can kind of commit a little bit more time for Parker Pope's portion. So next we'll jump right into the Office of Small Business Opportunities.
Good afternoon, everyone. As far as the Osbo office goes, I'm going to go over our SLBE numbers. We are currently at 6 for architectural and engineering, 55 construction, 57 non-professional services, 68 professional services, and 6 wholesale, which puts us at a total of 191 SLBEs. We currently have 9 pending applications and counting. As far as projects, we currently have a SLBE goal set on the Atlas Road Water and Sewer Project for 17%. Upcoming events, our last event was held on June 6th virtually via Zoom from 12 to 1:30, and that was Size Up SC. And we pretty much allowed our viewers to have access to a tool provided by the South Carolina Department of Commerce, which helps them look at the competitiveness in their business market. The next event OSBO will be hosting will be held on Thursday, August 22nd from 12 o'clock p.m. to 1:30 p.m. This will also be a virtual lunch and learn workshop. And this event will highlight the following topics for business owners: how to build, target, and identify relationships for business growth, how to navigate various network settings, use of social media to enhance networking, and how to own the room by creating a leadership presence. To register for that event, those interested can go to richlandcountysc.gov/OSBO. And just a friendly reminder, we are currently seeking small businesses that qualify for our SLBE certification program, which stands for Small Local Business Enterprise. For more information, please contact the Richland County Office of Small Business Opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lachey. Anybody have any questions for ASBO? Thank you, ma'am. Before we jump on to the comment, I would like to acknowledge in our presence with us today, County Council District 3 elect, Ms. Tyra Little. Sorry, I got so much stuff going through my head. Ms. Tyra Little is with us today, so thank you for getting a very early jump start at learning about this process. Also want to acknowledge Mr. Maurice here in person for the comment, and we got Miss Jackie online. Jackie speaking.
Yes, sir.
Miss Jackie, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I will start my report with the Davidson-Floyd report, which is item A. So on the second page, we will go into the details. Starting with the completed sites, we have none at this time. And the approved sites are 2 shelters. Those 2 shelters are at Decker Boulevard and Quiet Lane. Also at Crane, Church Road, and Lincoln. Going down a little farther is sites currently under permit review. We have 1 shelter, and that's the Millens Tech Northeast location. So the next page, sites and design. We have 8 benches that's presently in design. And so that's all we have for the benches and shelters. So with that being said, effective last week, we temporarily suspended the project for installing shelters and benches. And that's temporarily. And the reason that is, we have a consulting company now that's reevaluating our routes for on-time performance. So we do have several routes that are not performing well. So the consultants will be doing a deep dive of all of our routes to make sure they are performing at least 85% of the time. So that's why we're suspending the installation of the benches and the shelters, just in case we have to modify some routes. And that will eliminate us paying money to install shelters and benches, then have to turn around and go back and uninstall. So that's money being paid to install and uninstall. So this project of the route evaluation will take approximately 3.5 to 4 months. So once that's finished and the consultant give us the report as to what they recommend for our routes, then we will resume the installation of the benches and the shelters. Okay, so are there any questions for that part of the report now? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the ridership data. So the ridership for May was 145,293 passengers. For the same time last year, it was 131,263. So that's an increase of 10.68% with the comparison of the 2 months. So the ridership of the previous month, which was April of this year, was 139,772. So that also is an increase, and it's by 3.95%. The next page of the ridership report. So that merely shows the monthly ridership for every month of 2023, and also for 2024, it shows a monthly ridership for January through May. And it also shows the same for the average daily ridership on that report. The next page of the ridership report is the USC data. So for May of this year, we transported 1,335 passengers. This was a decrease of 29,070 passengers compared to April of this year. And that's because, you know, the students being out of session, they're not in school. And presently, the USC student orientation. So USC started orientation early this month, and that will run through August. And we are providing that service as well. So the last two reports is a financial report and then our DBE participation. And we do have our CFO on this meeting call if you have any questions regarding the finances. Other than that, that concludes my report unless you have some questions.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you, Miss Jackie.
All right, thank you.
All right, next we'll move along to Mr. Maloney, Director Maloney, my bad.
Thank you, Chairman. So every month we have a coordination meeting with South Carolina DOT. So I'm utilizing our recent agenda for the status of some of our larger projects that are on SCDOT roads, and then I'll go into others. Projects that are in design, Atlas Road widening, that is also on our list of projects that are out for bid right now, bidding now. So that is being bid as a utility relocation project at this time. And so we're looking for the bid closing on July 2nd. So we'll be getting that AB to Transportation Ad Hoc for a July committee meeting. Bluff Road improvements phase 2. We received comments from DOT and we're awaiting their right-of-way approval for our acquisition. We need along that road to put in a signal and new sidewalks up in the commercial district. Blythewood Road area improvements that we're looking at for an ATP to go to right away for the project on Creech and project on McNulty. McNulty from Main Street to Boney Road is SCDOT maintained, and that's where we need an authorization to proceed to right away. From Boney Road to on McNulty to Blythewood Road will be county maintained, and that will be able to proceed along with the extension of Creech, which will be a greenfield development. So we're looking for an ATP to kind of start the bidding on that. Broad River Neighborhood Improvement Project Corridor project is a awaiting an ATP for right of way. Crane Creek NIP is updating the plans, and that'll be going through the encroachment permit process, which should be quicker than the full process we do with the larger projects. That's sidewalk projects. Decker Woodfield NIP Hunt Club Road comments have been submitted back to SCD DOT, and we're looking for an authorization to proceed with right of way. And in that case, it's right of way is all permissions that are needed. We received the ATP for Brookfield sidewalk, and we'll be combining that with Hunt Club Road. Kelly Mill Road is in design. Preliminary drawings were sent to SCDOT in February, and we're awaiting comments. Lower Richland Boulevard widening, and we're looking for an authorization to proceed with right of way from DOT. We were submitted those plans in April. Polo Road widening project, we submitted preliminary right of way plans in April and provided responses on the pavement design comments back in April. And we're looking for comments on right of way plans so that we can get an ATP for right of way acquisition. We need these authorizations on their roads to proceed to that key step of acquiring right of way. And then we need another authorization from DOT on final plans to proceed to bidding out construction. Shop Road widening, we submitted the final right of way plan in early June, just this month, so that we can get to acquisition on Shop Road widening. There'll be a significant amount of that along the corridor for widening that road out to 5 lanes. And then what's called CERN Phase 2, where there was additional funds available. 100% design was completed and submitted as a encroachment permit to DOT. Once we have the approval of the encroachment permit from DOT, we can submit that to construction. Other projects that are currently in right-of-way acquisition: Smith Rocky Branch Greenway, kind of in downtown Columbia area. Pineview widening, Pineview Road widening project is in right-of-way, and Broad River Road widening project is in right-of-way acquisition at this time. Projects that are now bidding is Atlas, as I mentioned, Atlas Road widening, and next currently with county procurement is Percival Sidewalk to go to bid. Projects that are currently in construction, Dirt Road Package O and Dirt Road, Dirt Road Package O includes Howard Kugler Road in District 1, Sarah Matthews Road in District 7, Nathan Ridge Lane and Jackson Road in District 10. So those are out in various stages of construction. You know, they're working on rough grading and putting in their stormwater requirements on all those roads at this time. The other ones include Alpine Sidewalk. All the sidewalk is installed for Alpine Road Sidewalk. The next step is they're doing restoration on that part of the project, and they'll be resurfacing in the month of July from Percival Road to Two Notch Road. Then Blythewood Road widening is scheduled to be completed in July of 2025, next year. That's under construction. There were questions as to why did it look like construction wasn't happening for a couple of weeks. They're moving the fiber optic cables and resplicing those into the new location. So that wrapped up just last week as far as the splicing, and the general contractor is returning to continue on with road construction. Sunset Drive sidewalk is under construction. The road is currently closed. There's a lot of clearing to make way for the sidewalk. And so, taking trees down and grappling, couldn't have vehicles riding through there at that time due to the narrow passageway. So that's under construction. And then recently completed projects includes Bull and Elmwood intersection. The ribbon cutting was just a couple of weeks ago. So that project is just in its final punch list closeout phase. And with that, we had, completed the Screaming Eagle Percival intersection and the Garner's Ferry Road, Harmon Road intersection as well. And as far as the financial report that's in your package, we're just shy of $600 million spent total by the program out of the 1.1 billion. Give you an idea where we are, and it's on track with the current progress of the projects.
Very good. Anybody have any questions for Director Maloney? All right, thank you, sir. Next, we'll go to Stantec, but I don't believe Mr. Beatty is.
He's on vacation.
Oh, okay.
I don't have anything to add unless you got any questions for me. I know we updated the needs assessment list. I'm assuming everybody's got the latest on that. So I've got copies if you don't, but other than that, I'll pass my time.
Any questions about the needs assessment that was changed and changed and changed and changed and finalized and then changed and changed? All right, thank you, sir. You got off easy. Next, we'll go to Parker Poe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While she is pulling up the PowerPoint, just a couple of quick thoughts. So y'all met my colleague Emily Luther, and we appreciated very much the time y'all put in with us over the past 3 or so months, looking at all the issues surrounding the penny. What we want to do today is we're going to go through a couple of things. We're going to go through what we think is a close to final principles document, which is where y'all have spent a tremendous amount of time. We're going to look at, ironically, we're going to look at the allocation of the penny, and you'll see after you see the way the project list breaks down that there's some conversation to be had there. And then we're also going to just look at where we are on the roadmap. And so just see if we can get that going. Perfect. Thank you. So we can just sort of hop right in here. And if we can go just to that second slide, if it'll cooperate with you. There we go. All right. So for everybody online, everybody here, the work of the TPAC has really been focused here, so the gentleman from Stantec that's here behind me, they have worked very diligently to come up with this robust list of needs. And of course, over the period of time that we have all been talking, that list of needs has been added to. We've solicited and had other people come with projects or with potential needs that may turn into projects. And so y'all have helped us figure out how we're going to get from this long list to have a framework to prioritize those into actionable projects. And so that's really the point of the funnel, that we got to get to the point where we've got principles through which we can filter the needs to end up with an actionable project. You can go to the next slide. So one of the ways we've gotten here is the roadmap. I want to just go back through that so you can see how far we've come and what's left. As I said, we're going to go through the principles document. We're going to go through what we call the categorized needs list, which is candidly just taking the work that Stantec has done. And then after the conversation we had here last time, it's pretty clear that folks wanted to see that broken up by category. So we've got that here for you today. We have some penny allocation conversations that we want to have with you. And then finally, hopefully looking for a formal recommendation or vote, Mr. Chair, to send this on to the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee. We'll go to the next slide, please. So everything in gray is what we've accomplished. So y'all may remember we actually met and had a conversation even before March 19th. I think the first time we met with TPAC, Mr. Black, was sometime around March 18th with you and me and Emily had a conversation even earlier than that. So roughly 3 months ago. And so everything that you see in gray is all the things that have been done both by this committee and by the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee and by the County Council. What remain are there on the bottom right, the June 18th Ad Hoc Committee meeting, where we will talk with them tomorrow afternoon about the recommendations from the committee. On June 25th, the council has scheduled a work session, and you're certainly invited. That's a public meeting, but the point of the work session is effectively to review the work of this committee and of Transportation Ad Hoc that we'll talk about today. We have a public hearing on the penny ordinance scheduled for July 9th. The council is taking, at least in my experience, the very unusual step of scheduling a public hearing, but having no vote on the matter. They're just having a public hearing for the purposes of the hearing, what the concerns or input the public may have. You'll start seeing that public hearing notice in the paper here coming up this weekend. And then if things stay according to schedule on July 16th at the regularly scheduled council meeting, council will do two things. It will first adopt the penny ordinance, which has already gotten two readings. It will also adopt by a resolution the principles. So this will be something that is council affirmed. Don't know if it's going to remain in its current state or whether it'll be revised along the way. And once we get through July 16th, then the next work session, which is a TBD, is really focused on advocacy and education around the penny. So I think you all know that the other thing that's not on the roadmap is the actual election, November 5th, 2024. If folks want to know when the penny is going to be on the ballot, that's when it's going to be on the ballot. All right, so let's, if we can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about categorized needs list, but we're going to do so in the framework of the principles. So the document that's in front of you is the clean version of the track change version that I think Chairman Black sent out Friday. And what we did is we received comments, direct comments, I think, from 4 members of the TPAC. And you need an extra copy? That's extra right there. And so we incorporated just about all of those comments. We had a conversation with Mr. Black on Friday to make sure that we had hit everything in a way that we discussed, and then we sent these back around to you. What's in front of you is just a clean version of that same document. It's got an important attachment, which is the categorized needs list. And you'll see on the back of this document, there are 3 attachments. One is the categorized needs list, which we'll get to in just a minute. The second one is a description of the comment needs. There's no reason this is blank other than we haven't worked with Mr. Pearl and his team yet to get the summary that they would like to see in here. So that's not on them. They put out plenty of information of what they intend to do with the comment projects. I just want to talk with you about a summary of it and make sure it looks the way you want it to look. So we'll put that in once we've had that conversation. And then Exhibit C is a list of what we call major projects that will be subject to the penny. So before we go to the categorized needs list, I just wanted to see if anybody had any further questions, comments about the principles themselves. I would say this is the time to make them because as of today, this is the last scheduled time that the TPAC would talk through these. Maybe it would be helpful, Mr. Black, if I could just point out a few things that we added. So the first thing that we added, one of your members had some just good clerical changes, which we made. We reorganized this to include what we call the general conditions of the TPAC program. I think that was a comment that came from Ms. Keeper. I wanted to have those things up front. Those are simply overriding principles of this program. For instance, no matter what the principles say, no matter what the ordinance says, the county already has ordinances on the books that talk about how it selects dirt roads for paving and other similar types of policy and legal documents that they've adopted. This program and all expenditures of county funds are still subject to that. So we say that here in the general conditions. There's also, Mr. Black referenced, a revenue procedure from the South Carolina Department of Revenue that applies to our penny and all transportation pennies. And so we make it clear that anything we do under the penny program is subject to that. So there won't be any question about that. We also added, with respect to emerging needs, Chairman Black, we added a semi-annual review of those emerging needs versus an annual review, which is something that folks asked for. We also added TPAC input on emerging needs, which is also something that folks asked for. And you'll see when we get into the categorized needs list, one of the comments was about potentially adding additional dollars to resurfacing and paving. And you'll see that that's also been done, but that's in the actual project list. So I think that may have been your comment, Ms. Praylow. That's been taken care of.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned about the public hearing and it being advertised in the newspaper. Is it going out in any other? Is it being any other notice going out to other forms of social media or something else about this?
I think that I would say that the public information department or our communications director over here.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Yes, we have posted the information. It's currently on our website, the Richland County website. And we also are beginning our social media rotation. So, and we'll do that several times before the deadline.
Okay, because nobody reads the paper and nobody even gets the paper. I'm kind of curious about that.
We are doing our best to get it out there. So yes, sir.
Yeah, and no, sorry.
I was gonna say, and also remember the roadmap is listed on there, and we published that roadmap. Social media, as well as what the clerk does. I can't remember how many times now. I mean, it's at least as many views as we had, so it's more than that. So, greater than, I would say almost up to double digits at this point.
If you go back to the roadmap real quick, just also want to give you some assurance. So these are 19 different public meetings. Every meeting on here is a public meeting. And so we've been showing this roadmap at each and every one of those meetings. And so the good news is we've been talking about this public hearing for 3 months. So we're hopeful. But I think the council has done two things here that are unusual to make sure the public hearing sort of cuts through. One is they're holding the public hearing, as I said, without taking any action. But two, the state statute, believe it or not, requires you to publish it in the newspaper.
Okay.
And we're not just publishing it one time, we're publishing it 3 different times, which is also unusual for the county. Just want to make sure that it gets out there. So, but your point's well taken. And one day they'll change the statute and bring it, bring it up to speed. If we go to that next slide, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the categorized needs list. And let me just, we use terms that, we live with and just, that mean something to us. So let me just make this crystal clear. We've taken Stantec work. We have simply then taken those projects based upon input from Mr. Maloney and categorized them as county advancement projects, community investment projects, which are the 2 big distinctions. They're in your principles, they're in the ordinance. We have been talking about them all this time. And so, but for the first time, we wanted to kind of dig in and say, okay, based upon the input from this committee, based upon input from Transportation Department, how does this actually shake out? When you take that needs list and start to look at it through the lens of categories, where do we end up? So I'm going to toss the ball to you, Ms. Luther, since you've done a lot of work on this.
Sure. So if you will take a look at this summary page that is included as Exhibit A.
Chairman Black, were you able to email this out? The one I just sent you, the TPAC number?
I will, it's just.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So what this is we took the Stantec needs assessment that had been updated and shared with this committee. And based on discussions with Director Maloney and the Stantec team about the types of projects that were included on the needs assessment, where they fell under the categories. And so generally we have grouped the categories as like intersections and then some of those programmatic funds like resurfacing, sidewalks, dirt road paving, those fall more into the community investment need. So we've taken each individual project that's appeared on the Stantec needs assessment and grouped them according to what the category calls out as the type of project. So community investment really is targeting like ease of transportation for day-to-day commutes. Really kind of getting it to the neighborhood transportation infrastructure. And so those individual projects have been grouped under the community investment and also the advancement. Some of those projects that really are geared more towards opening up corridors so that additional traffic flows, targeting economic development projects or areas that we expect economic development growth. Those projects have been categorized into the county advancement needs. And again, the summary page takes the cost associated with each of those needs and then just kind of shows that. One thing I want to call out is based on the last meeting's discussion, there was some concern that the programmatic category, so the ones about resurfacing, sidewalks, and dirt road paving had not been high enough because the original needs assessment only identified the penny being collected for 12 years, plus some of the specific requests from the municipalities, DOT, and USC also were targeting some of those programmatic funds. So the programmatic categories were increased to include those specific requests from those other entities, but also increased to account for a longer collection. So that number, the programmatic resurfacing sidewalk dirt roads has been increased overall. But then the detail, like I said, each need from the Stantec needs assessment has been categorized, again, based on what the project would complete and whether it fell into that community category or that county advancement category, and identified.
Couple things that I think are important to point out. One is, and Emily has it here in green, that the total cost figures have not yet been adjusted for inflation. I see Lori Thomas here. Lori has done a fair amount of work with Stantec to think through what an inflated cost would look like. And so if you add up just these two categories here, you're looking at 3.7, 3.8 and some odd dollars. Lori, the inflation adjusted cost, as I recall, was it north of 8 billion potentially?
3.1 billion. At 5%, you're almost 10.
Yeah, so it's
At 3, you're at about 1.5.
right.
Once you
Okay.
go up, it's more than that. So if you land somewhere between that, yes, you're in that $8 billion number.
So we've been with Mike, just something.
Is that if you waited to do all the projects at the very end?
Yeah, there's gonna be some variance in there. That's linear because we don't know what would be done when. There's also the issue that if we need to bond money in the beginning, that will reduce it. So it would, your inflated number would be necessary at some point, in some ways, because you would have a bond issuance cost in there.
So said another way, if you took all these costs and projected them out over 25 years, assuming that you get some done, so not like, as Mike said, not everything's getting done in 25 years. Some things will get done in year 3 and some things in year 7 and some things in year 10 and so on. You're still going to have inflation. And so, is it as high as 10? Not sure. Should it be lower than 8? Not sure. Our working number has been $8 billion worth of needs just in the county advancement and community investment pools, inflation adjusted. I think what's important about what Emily has discussed here is you're starting to see how the current needs, what we have in front of us, because this doesn't account for emerging needs, how they break down. And you see that the current needs clearly tilt toward the community investment. And I think largely that's because of the investment in the programmatic categories. But, this is roughly, again, I'm just doing quick math in my head. Roughly 2/3 of these needs fall into community investment, roughly 1/3 falls into the county advancement. The comment projections over 25 years, correct me if I'm wrong, about 1.1 total, somewhere in there.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've got commented about 1.1, you've got sort of these community investment, county advancement projects, inflation adjusted somewhere in the $8 billion range. So if you add it up, is that inflation adjusted too? I'm sorry,
Yes.
Maurice, okay. So you get inflation adjusted numbers, total $9+ billion. We're not going to have $9 billion. We project a collection of around $4.5 billion. Which is it, before I go to the next thing, is there any questions about the categorized needs list? Let's just take a quick look at this slide. This is currently what's in the ordinance of county council. So remember, for those of you who don't follow council action, they take 3 different meetings or 3 different readings to adopt an ordinance. And so they can make tweaks, and that's what Mr. Brown was referring to earlier, that it's not final. But in the last meeting, these splits originally started out 40, 40, and 20. In other words, 40 to community investment, 40 to county advancement, and 20 to comment-related projects. At the last meeting and after discussions at the transportation ad hoc, these were changed to 30% to community investment, 50% to county advancement, and 20% to comment enhancement. And so just to try to put this into perspective for you, the last penny that the council or that the community approved was over 22 years, about $1 billion. About 2/3 of that $1 billion went to county/DOT/USC/city projects. And roughly $300 million of that went to the comment. And so this is a 25-year penny, so it's longer. And those are how the numbers will shake out right now. And I think we just wanted to sort of take the temperature of TPAC about these allocations, about whether or not you have a recommendation one way or another, about whether or not there should be any adjustments made to these percentages, and should that be part of your report or not? And if you want to leave that to council, that's certainly up to you, but if y'all had some input on that, I think they would appreciate hearing it.
There seems to be an inverse relationship between the needs and the allocations. Is that by design?
You're talking about the community investment.
When you
and-
got
and-
like community investment 30%, yet on your dollars, you just said it was 2/3 of the, I guess, these needs, excluding the comment, right?
Yep. So to be fair, the council, when it made these decisions, had not yet seen the breakdown you're seeing in front of it.
And I also don't think we had gotten a detailed list from the city of Columbia either, which changed the needs list a little bit too.
It would have increased the community investment.
I mean, could you argue it's a little subjective with some of the programmatic stuff that could very well be county advancement in nature? I mean, can we
Mike,
document this in
that?
such a way to give us some flexibility that, like, if it was originally community investment, but it actually impacts the whole county, let's just move it? And, or is that?
You want to talk about the kind of the filter that you proposed?
Well, one of the areas that we have kind of a variance between what would be the two would be intersections. So an intersection that's providing some help to the people that live north and south of, let's say, Harmon Road out on Garner's Ferry Road, we put an intersection in there. Improvements to provide additional safety. That's kind of like, that's region to that area. So, you know, just looking at the daily traffic volume on that Harmon Road going north, particularly where safety enhancements were added. It doesn't really, affect that many vehicles. And so in comparison to, say, Bull and Elmwood intersection, where Elmwood approaching the intersection is around 43,000 vehicles a day in and out on Elmwood, and each leg north or south, 28,000 and 23,000. So someone could, you could argue that's kind of county advancement when you're affecting that many people in an area, or, there may be a different definition also to what's advancing the county besides traffic, but that would be a way on intersections, for instance, like looking at 10,000 vehicles a day as being a split on that, where you could bring some of the intersections into county advancement because it's affecting so many people. Dirt road paving and resurfacing are primarily neighborhood projects. So even if the city was doing them, with some, certainly some outliers of roads that are, major transportation corridors. So they just seem to fit better with the community investment.
Can we hear from?
And I think this, you may also at some point, with the hybrid category, just simply it's a combination of both. To solve the kind of concern that you're addressing now. So I think something like that could clarify that. Because what you're saying now, for example, would be a combination of both in a sense. So we may, that category. I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll speak to it from what you raised, right? So what you're raising is like a really practical point. Like, why can't I just shift between, and how's that work? Once the ballot question's approved, and we do have statutory requirements, we have to say in the ballot question. One of the things we got to say is, how much money are we spending on which of these categories? And so if we ultimately decide that that's the split, and that's what the voters approve, then we would be subject to that split. Now, could we have a way to recategorize projects from community investment to county advancement, given some set of assumptions? Maybe.
I mean, Mike's example is a great point.
Yeah.
Bull and Elmwood is,
That's right.
without question, a county advancement project.
Right. But also pretty important to the Bull Street community. It's like, it has impacts on both.
Anybody have anything else?
County investment need. Even though it doesn't seem, I mean, how those numbers came out, because I'm looking at, you know, street widening or road widening. And in my mind, that is gonna cost a lot more than some of these stuff up there. But the numbers are smaller.
This is not as many.
Is that, do you follow me?
Yeah, but this is not as many widenings as some of these other things, I guess.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like more categories, like community investment. But the county advancement is, to me, that's more expensive than, even though right now we're not listing that many projects.
I agree with you. I think if you'd ask the average person to guess which one's higher,
That's.
they're gonna suggest counties higher all day long.
And I think that's exactly why we ended up where we did originally.
And that's why, you know, some of these numbers don't match the title, you know what I mean?
They just happen to match what's on the needs list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also have to understand what the voter might think is,
Um,
you know, neighborhood, well, which neighborhood is it mine? I don't know. Oh, you're putting a lot to county advancement. That's everybody. Okay. I'm good. I mean, so there is some subjectivity and strategy to this as well. At least with those numbers, you finally get Broad River and Hartsville done. You'll make a lot of people happy. So there's the bright side. I'm happy to get skewed this way.
So. Yeah, I'm confused now too. Like, just because on there, up there for the community investment, you're showing 1.35. But on here, is it 2.549?
That's the source. That's how much would be available to cover the 2.549.
So in other words, there's basically about $1 billion worth of projects that will not get done. That's on that list.
If it continues to be split this way. That is assuming.
But then, is that also saying then for the county investment on there is 2.250 billion, but on here it's only 1.285?
Two entirely different numbers. That's a source up on the screen. That's an expense on your sheet. That's also a non-inflated expense. In other words, there's no inflation in those numbers. That is all we're going to have based upon collections. So that's a source. The expenses, inflation adjusted, are going to be more than what's on the page. We'll never have enough to pay for everything.
Okay.
The question is, are folks comfortable with this split, or do you want to recommend that this go forward and let council discuss it, or do you have any specific thoughts? And it's okay one way or another. We just felt like this is something, once the ad hoc committee sees these numbers, they're probably going to ask, well, did TPAC have anything to say about the split?
Has ad hoc, has these numbers or this been presented to them?
Tomorrow at 4:00.
So the percentages, is that for now,
Correct.
it's already been voted on.
But it's still subject to change until the council at third reading. So,
So council is ultimately the one that can change that.
yes, sir.
Because all we're doing is just giving them a suggestion or a recommendation.
Recommendation.
They can still just kick us to the curb and still do whatever.
Oh, they wouldn't do that.
But it is because we have no teeth, we have no authority. We're just advisory, so we can advise them, but that don't mean the council has to take our advice or accept it.
Sure. Obviously, we're gonna have a gap with inflation.
Yeah.
And as part of this by design, that when we have that gap, we want to make sure we have a lesser gap in county advancement.
I don't know if it's done by design or not. I think it comes back to what you said earlier. that there's a presupposition probably that we have a whole lot more expense in that area, and that's just not how the needs list is breaking down. So council doesn't have the data in front of it yet that you have, has not yet had the data in front of it that you have in front of you. So just given that, if there's a recommendation or advice to council, that's fine. If not, that's okay too. Yeah.
And the groupings were done by, is it Director Maloney's office, or like, how did we get the numbers into which categories?
Based upon the standards that were set and discussed at the last TPAC meeting, we then sort of took them and put them into categories.
And I think if you don't have anything real specific, even if you can say that here's some things we think, council ought to consider, even if you're not specific about what it ought to be, but at least, when you're making these decisions, can y'all make sure y'all consider these facts or whatever? I think they help with it.
Does anybody have any objections to an affirmative recommendation of these numbers in our recommendation to council? Ad hoc.
Yeah, the numbers.
I mean, because these are the numbers that we would be supporting and recommending.
Those are the numbers from Stan Tech with the addition for programmatic expense that were discussed the last meeting. Yeah.
My only concern, Mr. Chair, is that if everything were to be approved as is, and something like a Bull and Elmwood comes up again, that could be county advancement, but it's otherwise referendumed into community investment, and then we're told we can't legally do it and don't have the flexibility to change it. And in that sense, I would almost suggest we go through and have one more layer to say, which of community investment can we consider county advancement, and we move it before it's final. I don't know if we have time to do that, but that would be a real shame. I mean, Bull and Elmwood is just it's the newest, right? But it's like, so many people are talking about how great it is, how helpful it is. And that as it sits right now is community investment, which is getting 20% less if that were to be approved as is.
And how do we decide if it's a community investment or a county advancement? Who makes that decision?
There's some principles, there's some guidelines in this document. It has a lot to do with traffic and scope.
Because I see that it can be flexible, like we can, distribute in two different ways.
And that it would be tough to do now, although we could, I'm able to get the data off the internet now for those latest traffic volumes. Just to give you, why is intersections adding up to that much? The current Penny has 12 intersections and we're working on the 12th one. All of 11 before that have been completed. And so now this new list from the needs assessment, and that was before DOT gave us their latest one, so I don't have that total, but we're over 40. We're in closer to 50 intersections on the list coming from where we were at 12. So it's quite a bit more. And as far as separating those out, we could do it. And we only have a short period of time to do that, but we could kind of look at it from that traffic volume, in the next few weeks.
And that could potentially result in some of the resurfacing, programmatic resurfacing, if the road is big enough, or I should say trafficked enough, being shifted to county advancement. Like in your mind, if we said, hey, give us shift 10% over, is that you kind of thinking of resurfacing and a few intersections would be where that's coming from? Obviously, I understand your point. Not dirt roads and sidewalks are specific to those areas.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you're resurfacing certain roads, I guess if you keep going, there's the list of county advancement needs explicitly stated here. Seems pretty hefty. I suppose there could be some more people from community if they are trafficked enough.
It's possible, and I think maybe in the city's request, that may be more possible than we find in the county's request.
Especially because I know the city included maybe it got pulled out with some DOT roads that it would take responsibility for. To some extent, like smaller DOT roads. Maybe we could argue those are,
I think they were requesting paving, SCDOT, resurfacing and reconditioning, but,
it'll be an easy sell to move that to county. Hey, it's-
if that would meet the definition of county advancement as an operation of itself.
Right.
So where the committee is headed is to reclassify as much of the community investment into county advancement as is reasonable based upon.
If council is confidently sticking to that, yes.
So then as far as our recommendation, is our recommendation required tomorrow? I mean, is tomorrow the absolute deadline for our recommendation to ad hoc?
Yes.
So I think then we need to decide then if we want to support this as presented, or if we just not say anything about this.
It's.
Well, let me go to my point now.
Yes.
You know, this as I said now, remember now, if you don't decide anything, you're talking about some things right now that what's considered as we decide. At least you can say, you know, here's some things we talked about and want to consider as y'all go through the process.
And that gives you address the.
And that's what I'm listening to.
What we've discovered.
And not to speak behind Councilmember Livingston, because he said it very well, but I think as a value add to the process, I would want you to have had your voice heard. So council can't sit in the discussions per se as a body, but they can hear your deliberation through, as Mr. Livingston stated, the questions that you raised, the things that came up in discussion. And I think that would be valuable, just as valuable as a specific recommendation, because the deliberation is something that's going to be valuable for those members to consider. So I wouldn't get hung up on taking a vote, but I would get hung up on, do we want the voice of TPAC to reflect what you're saying here more broadly? And the way you would do that is these same types of questions would go to ad hoc and ultimately through ad hoc to council. So I would actually give strong consideration. Again, that Mr. Livingston said it, he knows better than I do, but I do think that has a lot of value. And I would encourage you to strongly consider at least having the questions that you have considered as part of your send to the ad hoc committee. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
So are we at the point now where we are ready to make a recommendation?
I think so, Chairman Black.
Then I guess at this point, because we are running out of time, then it would be appropriate at this time for a motion.
Well, are we putting this to a vote, or are we just making a recommendation to add the language in there for the flexibility to move or projects if that category fits in another area? I mean, move to do so.
Sorry to do all that talking, stir that pot.
And then budget.
Really good at that.
Yes.
Like, I think, transportation ad hoc would benefit from knowing how the committee feels, whether you do it by consensus or vote, that's up to you, how you normally act about the principles. On the one hand, and then to the extent the committee has thoughts that it wants to share about these percentages and or concerns it wants to raise. I mean, we've obviously heard them, but if you have something specific you want to say to ad hoc about consideration of shifting, consideration of adjustment, just sort of based upon what you've seen, that the additional kind of analysis needs to be done there. That's fine too. And then of course we can can be part of the conversation. But I do think they're gonna wanna know, did TPAC approve what's come before us? And how did they do so?
I mean, and I think overall, we support this. The only concern is perhaps we can support this as is with a little asterisk to the side that says, please, spend a little more extra effort or something on this, so we're ensuring an equal. I mean, I
think that's fine.
Is that a fair assumption from everyone? You okay with that? So then, is there a motion to approve the project's principles and categories with some concerns about the
split?
The split?
So moved.
Second.
We have some members online and some members here. Should we do like a roll call or? Okay. Then at this point, we will, all those in favor, can you bring up the Zoom part so we can see the members? For the members online that wish to vote in the affirmative to support this, can you please raise your hand digitally? Thank you, Chris. Mr. Williams. Ashton Williams. All right, Mr. And then, do we have one more on there? Was it Miss Shirley? Miss Shirley? If you wish to vote in the affirmative, can you please signify by raising your hand digitally? Unless you want to come on camera. All right, so we have to there. All right, so those members that are present now, if you vote in the affirmative, please raise your hand, signify an aye. All right, anybody opposed? Raise your hand now. Well, actually, I think everybody voted in the affirmative.
Yeah.
There's Miss Shirley. Thank you, Miss Shirley. All right, so it looks like it is unanimous that we will proceed with the support with, and then I guess I'll get with you when we can figure out logistically. All right, so thank y'all for all the excess meetings that we've had, the hard work, the email communications. I want to thank Stantec for their hard work and all this. And of course, Parker Poe. I know they'll probably be nice to have a break from me for a while because we communicate quite frequently. So does anybody have any questions or anything else to bring up?
From what I understand, if there is a project that is not on the list, we can still go to, council meeting, county council meeting and, suggest application.
Like on the emerging needs, through emerging needs, so yeah, that's on there.
Huh?
All right, our next meeting is scheduled for July 15th. The time is now 5:09 and we are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, John, how do you raise your hand visually?
Well, they can.